I found it so interesting listening to the violin concerto and this string quartet, because I imagine that it must have been a very different process writing for the string instruments and the string family as opposed to the wind family, which you're so familiar with. What challenges did you encounter when you were writing idiomatically for string instruments, or on a technical level or aesthetic level?
I think luckily I've been doing it for a long time now. So my first record Natalie was involved in that as well. She's the violinist on the new project, but she had her put a string quartet together for my first record, which was string quartet and then a jazz trio of saxophone, bass, and drum. So I've always really been interested in it and had experience. Like I just reached out and got in touch with string players and started writing for them. And so that's in any idiom how you get better at it. A lot of studying, but you would learn a lot by just doing it and finding what works with the instruments. When you hear back what you wrote, is that effective? Did that work? Did it not work? So just trying to just be around it as much as I can, that helped a lot. And I guess I've always I really love the sound of the string quartet and stringed instruments, and they're not as much of a center in jazz, or they weren't, although in New York especially, there's so many amazing improvising string players now. So it's slowly changing. But yeah, in my day-to-day saxophone playing, I'm usually playing more with a rhythm section or with woodwinds or brass players. But you cultivate friendships with string players, and then when you're writing for them, you call them up and ask them all kinds of questions about, does this work? How does this work? Just over time.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the premise of the violin concerto? Because I understand that's the basis for the new release Pivotal Arc. The creative process for the violin concerto, I gather it was happening over a 13-year period, which is a very long time to be creating a concerto. But please tell me how did it come about, and why did you decide to write a violin concerto?
Well, it came from working with Natalie Bonin as the violin player I mentioned. We met at the Banff Center Jazz Summer Workshop Program many years ago. Like, I guess it's nearly 20 years ago now. They have an amazing summer workshop program. And at the time I was out there as a coach, and Natalie was interested in delving into her jazz playing a bit more. And I was just really impressed with her attitude and her ability and her training as a classical player, and this interest in learning how to improvise more. So we kept in touch after that, and then I wrote my first record. I asked her to be involved and put a string quartet together, and wrote a whole bunch of music for that. And then we just kept in touch. We ended up doing some concerts with that. And after one of the concerts in Toronto, we started throwing around the idea of writing her something a little more substantial that focused on all the different skills that she had. And so slowly it went from talk to trying to get funding to make it happen. So we got a commission from the Canada Council for the Arts, and I wrote a first draft sort of over a 5-year period because we both were very busy with other projects as well. But we finished that, and then we did a demo in New York City. I think it was around 2014. And then we did some more fundraising, and we're finally able to raise enough to make this album in 2018. I'm sure raising funds for large ensemble music is challenging.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were writing for Natalie's skills as a musician, but I also read in the liner notes, she said that she really enjoyed being able to put her own personality into your music, and that came across so much when I was listening to the violin concerto. She plays with such verve and with such flair. So is that something that's really important to you? Do you write specifically for the musician's personality?
Well, in this instance, it was kind of an ideal situation where that's possible. Not always possible. Like when I wrote the string quartet, I knew that they were really good, but I was meeting them for the first time. So now that we got to work together, if I write something for them, then I'll be able to cater it to their individual personalities, which I got to see a little more. But yeah, the beautiful thing about writing for someone that you've known for a long, long time is that you get to, or I get to pick and choose what elements I want to showcase. I knew she would do really well at playing tango music because I'd heard her do that before. I'd heard her work with Ted Nash's group. He's a great saxophonist and works with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. And he wrote a big band piece our big suite, and one of the movements featured her. So I got to hear that as well. So I'd heard her in a lot of different settings in addition to with my own music. So when it came time to sit down and write something, I knew that there was quite a breadth of what I could ask her to do. And then I wanted to showcase things she was really great at, and then also sometimes just push her in a little direction that might be kind of, I wonder what that would sound like if she was in this landscape, which maybe she wouldn't necessarily be super comfortable in, but I'm sure she'll find an interesting way through it. So that's super nice when you get to have that opportunity. But then, as I was saying, when I was working with the string quartet, we didn't, just because of deadlines and everything, I didn't have a chance to workshop the music with them, which we had originally hoped to do. But it all worked out fine because I checked out their previous recordings and did the homework on that, and then it all worked out really nicely. I sent them music in the first rehearsal. It was just a really nice surprise to hear them interpret it the way they did. They really got it. So different approach, but I think important to develop the skills to be able to do both things, like to work with somebody, which is ideal, to be able to work with somebody you know that over a long time and really cater and customize the music to them, but also important to have the skills to be able to just come in and write something.
And you just mentioned there that you wanted to write music that was going to push the musicians in certain ways. And what really struck me is in the second movement of the violin concerto, and also in your string quartet, there's a real improvisatory quality in the music as well. And in the second movement of the violin concerto, you have a written and an improvised cadenza. Now, I'm really interested to learn, do you give specific instructions for your musicians to improvise in a certain way, or are they given free rein to improvise in a way that they want to? How do musicians generally feel when they're improvising?
Well, it really depends, because thankfully I'm a performer as well and play a lot of other people's music. So I kind of know how I like to be asked to do something in that setting. So you got to be, or I find I want to be as hands off as I can. And generally I'll it really varies from situation to situation. So like in that instance with the violin concerto, where I knew there was something very specific and then she was going to improvise, and then I knew there was going to be a landing point as well, because that particular moment is the end of the second movement and it's a bridge into the third movement. So I think all I really needed to tell her, because we had a good working relationship, was, well, this is going to be the jumping off point, and then I'd like you to sort of set up and land in the next movement. You can do whatever you want, but as long as we kind of feel like it's not, I didn't want it to be like, okay, here's the end of the written material, now she's going to improvise, and then boom, we're back to written material. I wanted it to feel kind of connected and seamless. And most really good improvisers are very good at that. They love having a little something that they can use if you want. Other times there's some other improvisations and solos over different things. I generally will not say very much unless I feel it's not really in a particular, unless it's not serving the overarching narrative or something, or I'll just try to be just suggestive of something, like, oh, maybe try this or maybe try that. And that usually I'm just surprised in such a nice way that somebody comes up with something I wasn't really expecting, which is the whole idea why I love having improvisation and blending it together with a different landscape behind whatever they may be used to. I'll try different strategies in different places too.